So here the next part of the unit is, that is, structure of atom. In the structure of atom, let us go to, it is, introduction. In the introduction, we know that atoms and molecules are building blocks of matter, and if you go to, particularly if you are going to the atom, and if you speak about its composition, it contains, when you are saying composition of atom, mainly it is made up of electrons, protons, and neutrons. It is made up of electrons, protons and neutrons, in which that is, protons and neutrons in general, they are together called as nucleons, and these protons and neutrons together, they are present in nucleus of atom. And you know very well that electrons are present outside the nucleus. Outside the nucleus. If you take the nucleus, you go into the nucleus, outside the nucleus. So suppose if you go to the rational, the structure of the atom, a simple empirical structure of the atom, if you take, here you can take the positively charged nucleus. This is positively charged nucleus, and it is made up of two fundamental particles. In fact, when you say atom and its composition, we can say this composition of the atom is made up of fundamental particles. There are more than 100 fundamental particles are present in atom actually, but among so many different fundamental particles, we take only 3 fundamental particles, that is electrons, protons and neutrons, as a main preference of our discussion. So inside the nucleus of an atom, we have 2 fundamental particles, that is protons and neutrons, and outside the nucleus, if you take outside the nucleus, that is, suppose for example, because you know very well that the atom is anyhow spherical in shape, so for example, rationally I am going to draw a few orbits, the circular paths I am going to draw, but not many. This is the first circular orbit, then second circular orbit, then likewise third circular orbit, fourth, and so on. So what you are noticing here is, because atom is spherical in shape, so outside the nucleus we have, these are circular orbits. Here we have electrons. In all the cases you find electrons, and these are circular orbits which are circular, and this is nucleus. Protons and neutrons together, they are called as nucleons, and this is interorbital space, and that means what we are able to understand is, from this it is very clear that it has 3 fundamental particles, 1 proton, 1 neutron. Electrons are present outside the positively charged nucleus, and these orbits, they are circular. They are showing the circular paths, and here you find the outside the nucleus, you find certain amount of electron density. This is the electron density outside the nucleus. All these dots, you can see that more the number of electrons, more is the electron density. Either you can call it as electron cloud, or you can call it as electron density. So this is electron E bar means electron density, or you can call it as electron cloud. And from this diagram it is very clear that this is the structure of the atom. This is structure of atom, because atom itself is very small in size. The atom itself is very small in size. The size of atom is 1 angstrom, which is equal to 1 angstrom, and it is equal to 10 to the power of minus 8 centimeter. And the nucleus is much more smaller. So the size of nucleus, if you take, it is equal to, that is 10 to the power of 1 Fermi, we say 1F. The size is 1 Fermi. 1 Fermi is equal to 10 to the power of minus 13 centimeter. So actually here 1 Fermi is equal to 10 to the power of minus 13 centimeter, or 10 to the power of minus 15 meters. 1 Fermi. 1 angstrom is equal to 10 to the power of minus 8 centimeter, which is equal to 10 to the power of minus 10 meter. Sometimes 0.1 nanometer also you can take, nanometer. So these are all important conversions, and it is very clear that the size of the atom is greater than the size of the nucleus. So size of atom is greater than the size of nucleus. From the values we can say that the size of the atom is greater than size of the nucleus. So the next part of the discussion is, that is important properties of, important properties of fundamental particles of atom. Important properties of fundamental particles of atom. So now what is happening here is, you know that the fundamental particles of atom, if you take, here we have three fundamental particles. A, one is electron, B, proton, and C, that is neutron. So first of all, let me take the first case, that is, if you take the first case, that is A, first one, if you take properties of electron, if you go to the important properties of electron, it was discovered by J.J. Thomson during discharge tube experiments. First point. Second point, then if you go for this electron, what are actually these electrons? These electrons are actually called as stream of negatively charged particles. Stream of negatively charged particles. Okay, that is called beta particles. Stream of negatively charged particles called beta particles. And if you take the mass of electron, its mass of electron is actually equal to 1 by 1837 times that of mass of proton. Mass of electron is equal to 1 by 1837 times that of the mass of proton, or in other words, you can take mass of electron, M stands for mass of electron is equal to 1 by 1837 times that of the mass of proton, or mass of proton is equal to, mass of proton is equal to 1837 times that of the mass of electron. So from this it's very clear that the mass of proton is greater than mass of electron. Then if you go for the charge continuation, You go to the charge, next continuation, next part of the discussion. Electron is continued. If you go to the charge of electron, normally if you take the charge of electron, it is negatively charged particles, but if you take the absolute charge, that is equal to, that is minus 1.602 into 10 to the power of minus 19 coulombs, because the charge of electron, the charge of any particle is expressed in coulombs. So minus 1.602 into 10 to the power of minus 19 coulombs. Similarly, if you go for mass of electron expressed in AMU, that is, if it is absolute mass of electron, if you take, this is 0.00055 atomic mass units. Also you can take. Then if you want, you can add few more points. Specific charge of electron. Specific charge of electron is equal to, that is nothing but E by m. E by m of electron. E is the electronic charge of electron, m is the mass of electron, which is equal to 1.76 into 10 to the power of 8 coulombs per kg is the specific charge of electron. So all these are the properties of, electrons. All this comes under the properties of electron. Now similarly, let us go to the properties of the protons. So the second part of the fundamental particle of atom is, that is proton. So go for B, that is proton. Protons are actually, it was discovery by Goldstein. The discovery was done by Goldstein during discovery by the Goldstein of protons is during discharge tube experiments. It is during the discharge tube experiments the protons have been discovered, and these protons are also called as canal rays or simply positive rays. That is, these canal rays obtained from the discharge tube, they depend on nature of gas. Nature of gas means preferably hydrogen, H2 gas and helium. These are the two gases which we can pass in the discharge tube, and the positive rays comes out from the electrode in the discharge tube, and with that positive rays we can identify that those are nothing but protons. So if you go for the mass of proton, mass of proton can be expressed in two units. M of P is the mass of proton, which is equal to 1.0087 AMU expressed in atomic mass units. But if the same mass of proton is expressed in terms of absolute mass of the proton, which is equal to, that is 1.67 into 10 to the power of minus 24 grams, or 1.67 into 10 to the power of minus 27 kg. Mass of proton is equal to 1.67 into 10 to the power of minus 24 grams is equal to 1.67 into 10 to the power of minus 27 kg. Then similarly, if you go for the absolute charge, the absolute charge of proton is equal to plus 1.602 into 10 to the power of minus 19 coulombs. Absolute charge of proton is plus 1.602 into 10 to the power of minus 19 coulombs, and if you go to the relative charge, it is simply plus 1 unit of charge we can take for that is protons. And coming back to neutrons, if you take neutrons, if you are taking, discovery was done by Chadwick discovery was done by Chadwick during the bombardment of lighter nuclides with the alpha particles in ionization chamber. And if you take, that is the neutrons, mass of neutron, if you take the absolute mass, if normally in absolute mass we can take it as 1.00, that is 87. So here I can take 78 AMU, here I can take 87 AMU. And the mass of neutron, absolute mass in terms of kg or grams, it's almost same. So mass of neutron is equal to, that is 1.67 into 10 to the power of minus 24 grams, or which is equal to 1.67 into 10 to the power of minus 27 kg. The mass of neutron and mass of proton, and the mass of proton is more or less same. If you go for the symbol, what is the symbol we can use for neutron? Usually it has a neutral charge, and it has, its mass is equal to, the atomic mass of neutron is almost equal to 1 unit. And similarly for proton also, usually for proton you take, all protons are considered as hydrogen atoms, so we can simply take 1H1 we can take, and this is a symbol for proton and this is a symbol for neutron, and this is how we can make a comparing and contrasting differences between the neutrons as well as protons as fundamental particles. So these are neutrons properties and these are protons properties. So here if you look at the diagrams here, let us try to observe what is happening in the, we are already saying that the cathode rays are nothing but sources of electrons and the anode rays are the sources of the protons. So let us try to differentiate with the diagrammatic view. With the help of a diagram, let us try to understand how the cathode rays, if you take cathode rays, you know very well that cathode rays are nothing but stream of negatively charged particles called electrons. So what is happening here is, this is the discharge tube. You can see that the diagram, you can see this diagram is the discharge tube. It is made up of a long cylindrical glass tube, discharge tube. The discharge tube, you find one end of the discharge tube is equipped with the cathode electrode. You can see this is cathode electrode and this is the conducting wire, and this is the concave surface of the that is anode electrode, which is given by the positive sign convention. Anode electrode given by the positive sign convention, and negative sign is given for the cathode as a sign convention. Then you find that once the current is going to pass into the discharge tube, of course we are filling the certain source of gas, certain lighter gas is going to be filled inside this discharge tube, maintaining a low pressure, because if you increase the pressure the discharge tube may break. That's why we have to use low pressure, the gas at low pressure, but of course the voltage is high voltage. The potential difference applied during the passing of current into the discharge tube is, we pass very high voltage, not less than 10,000 volts, but pressure is just for, almost 5 to 10 atmospheres, not more than that. So once the current is going to enter into the discharge tube, you find that from the cathode electrode, you find that stream of particles keep scintillating, keep moving from the cathode electrode to the anode electrode, and they hit on the surface of the electrode, that is anode surface. Once they hit, you find that this stream of cathode rays can be traced by the photographic plate. Maybe this is the kind of photographic plate which is acting on the photographic plate. You are trying to trap the cathode rays. But one thing what you have to understand here is, the electrons in the form of negatively charged particles, they are originating from the cathode electrode. And one more important aspect in the cathode rays is, it is independent of the cathode rays obtained. Formation of cathode rays are independent of nature of gases, nature of gases used in discharge tube, used in discharged tube. So we can see that all the negatively charged particles, stream of negatively charged particles, they are trying to originate from the cathode electrode and they are trapped on the photographic plate. If you try to put a small mechanical wheel, because cathode rays have certain high energy, they have high kinetic energy, they have higher kinetic energy, and they also have the higher velocity. Based on this, you can see that they cause mechanical motion when any object is placed in their origin of the beam or particular row of the cathode rays. So this is how we can originate the cathode rays from the, that is, cathode electrode. Now if you look into the anode rays, the only difference between cathode rays and anode rays is formation of anode rays are dependent. They are dependent on nature of gas used. They are dependent on the nature of gas used in discharge tube. And because we are saying that it is dependent on the nature of the gas which is used in the discharge tube, what is happening is, suppose you're trying to fill some gas inside the discharge tube, some rarefied gas, for example helium gas or hydrogen gas, if you are going to use in the discharge tube. Then for example, if you are using hydrogen gas, the hydrogen gas first, once you are going to pass the electric current, once you are passing the electric current at high voltage into the discharge tube, you find that the gases which are present, they get ionized. If it is ionized, it gives a charged particle. And also free electrons. Along with that, it also gives free electrons. So what is happening is, suppose if I am writing here one equation, I am writing, if you take H2 gas, when it is getting ionized, it becomes hydrogen atom. It is in the atomic state. 2 hydrogen atoms we are getting. When you are getting 2 hydrogen atoms, still the current is going to pass, it absorbs some amount of current from the discharge tube, from the source of current, and these atoms, they get ionized to become H plus ions and free electrons. These free electrons, you can see all these are nothing but the electrons. The arrows which are moving towards the anode are electrons, because electrons are negatively charged particles, and the arrows which are moving towards the cathode, these are all anode rays. Means here H plus ions, all H plus ions, we can call them as positive rays. These H plus ions are nothing but protons, and we can call them as positive rays. And these positive rays, obviously whatever the ions are formed because of the ionization of the atoms, molecules are broken into atoms, and atoms are ionized to positively charged particles. Positively charged particles are going to become the positive rays. These positive rays, they migrate towards the cathode electrode. You can see that this cathode is perforated. So when this cathode is perforated, you can see from the gaps all the canal rays or the positive rays are moving towards the cathode, and they move beyond the cathode. They are moving beyond the cathode because maybe here we are trying to place a photographic plate. In the photographic plate, we are going to trace all the positive rays obtained during the production of anode rays using the discharge tube. So what is happening here is, all the positively charged particles, that is ionized gases, they move towards the cathode electrode, and all the free electrons which are obtained during the ionization of the atoms, that is hydrogen gas atoms, all the free electrons which are obtained, they try to move towards the cathode electrode, because the simple reason is, electrons are negatively charged particles, all the electrons are negatively charged particles, but the anode electrode is positive, so they try to migrate towards the oppositely charged electrodes. Such that the positive particles, that is anode rays, are separately collected at the photographic plate within the discharge tube. So from these two diagrams, it is very clear and very systematically we are able to differentiate the production of anode rays as well as cathode rays. So the next part of the discussion is, that is Rutherford's atomic model. If you go for Rutherford's atomic model, in this Rutherford's atomic model, if you take a small diagram, that is, I am taking here positively charged nucleus which contains protons and neutrons, and you can see that this is the electron, circular path and the electron. So here from this diagram, this is structure of atom. Structure of atom, and it is spherical in shape. So here what we are noticing here is, first atom is spherical in shape. First postulate, atom is spherical in shape. First point. Second point, central region of the atom. Central region of the atom is occupied by denser positively charged nucleus. Positively charged nucleus, the central region of the atom is occupied by the positively charged nucleus. The nucleus contains nucleons, and nucleons are made up of protons plus neutrons, and that is the surrounding nuclear region, the circular paths. Electrons revolve around the positively charged nucleus in circular paths. Electrons revolve around nucleus in circular paths. Around the nucleus. Electrons revolve around the nucleus in circular paths. They are present in orbits, and you find that the size of nucleus is smaller than the size of the nucleus is smaller than size of atom. So one important observation what we have to make here is, because the nucleus and atom both are spherical in shape. That's why if it is spherical in shape, then the volume of the sphere, we know it is 4/3 of pi r cube. Volume of a circle or volume of the sphere is always 4/3 of pi r cube. So what I am going to do here is, that is volume of atom. Suppose if I am taking volume of atom divided by volume of nucleus is equal to, that is 4/3 of pi. Radius of the atom is nothing but size of the atom, which is equal to 10 to the power of -8 centimeter whole cube, because the size of the atom is 1 angstrom. 1 angstrom is equal to 10 to the power of -8 centimeter. Again divided by 4/3 of pi r cube, because the size of the nucleus is nothing but 10 to the power of -13 centimeter whole cube. So 4/3 of pi gets cancelled. So if it is getting cancelled, then again volume of atom divided by volume of nucleus is equal to, that is 10 to the power of -24 centimeter cube divided by 10 to the power of -39 centimeter cube. So centimeter cube gets cancelled. Finally, volume of the atom divided by volume of nucleus is equal to, this is going to become 10 to the power of -24 into 10 to the power of +39 by 1. So this is going to become 10 to the power of 15. That means, therefore it is very clear that from this observation, it is very clear that the volume of the atom is 10 to the power of 15 times that of the volume of nucleus. So therefore it is clear that volume of atom, from this we have to understand that volume of atom is equal to, that is 10 to the power of 15 times 10 to the power of 15 times the volume of the nucleus. Volume of nucleus. So therefore it is proved that the size of the atom is always greater than the size of the nucleus. So let us go to the setbacks, that is setbacks or demerits or drawbacks of Rutherford model. Rutherford's model. So here what we are noticing is like there are two important drawbacks. One is Rutherford could not explain the stability of atom. It could not speak anything about the stability of atoms, and it could not speak about the line spectrum. Of atoms. So what is happening here is like if you go to the stability of atom, when we go to the discussion of stability of atom, actually stability of atom, if you take according to the classical laws of electrodynamics, according to the classical laws of electrodynamics given by that is James Clerk Maxwell, which is given by James Clerk Maxwell theory. If you take a positively charged nucleus, and if the electron is somewhere here, it will continuously so if this is the charged particle, this is the electron charged particle, as long as the electron is revolving around the positively charged nucleus, according to the classical laws of physics or according to the classical laws of electrodynamics given by James Clerk Maxwell's theory, as long as the electron is revolving around the positively charged nucleus, it has to come closer and closer to the nucleus, and it has to collapse. This is the nucleus. When the electron is continuously revolving around the positively charged nucleus, it will radiate energy continuously. I have to put the term like this: electron revolving around nucleus. If the electron is revolving around the nucleus, it follows this condition. It radiates energy continuously. Then it loses energy. When it is radiating energy, it has to lose energy. Its size of the orbit of the atom decreases, and it has to plunge. Into nucleus, and finally atom has to collapse. But this mechanism is not observed in the case of Rutherford's atomic model. That means if all these conditions are satisfied, then we can speak about the stability of atom. But if an atom has to become stable, when you say atom is stable, we have to say that when the atom is stable, if the atom is acquiring the stability, then it is electrically neutral. Atom is electrically neutral, we say. When we say atom is electrically neutral, when it is satisfying the condition of stability. When it is satisfying the condition of stability, then we have to understand that when the electron is revolving around the positively charged nucleus in the circular path continuously, this revolving electron around the nucleus, it has to radiate energy continuously. When it is radiating energy continuously, it has to come closer to the nucleus. Such that there is decrease in the size of the orbit. Then ultimately that electron will finally plunge. The revolving electron will plunge into the nucleus, and finally the atom has to collapse. Once the atom is collapsed, then that means you have to understand that the atom do not exist at all. So that means it electrically becomes neutral, and finally the stability has been achieved. But this This mechanism was not explained by the Rutherford's concept, and that is why we say that the stability is not clearly explained by the Rutherford's atomic model. And what about the line spectrum? When the electron is radiating energy continuously, electron if it is radiating energy continuously then it must give continuous spectra. That means we should not find no discrete lines are observed. But you find that the individual lines, no discrete line should be observed, but this observation was not properly explained by the Rutherford. That is why he could not explain anything about the line spectrum of the atoms during the emission of radiation continuously by the electron of the atom. So these are the two important drawbacks which were not properly highlighted or explained by the Rutherford's atomic model. So here the next part of the discussion here in the structure of atom is, that is, properties of atom. You know very well that if you take an atom is made up of electrons, protons, and it is also made up of neutrons. You know very well that if you take protons, that is, if you are taking electrons and protons, if you take protons and neutrons, these together we call them as nucleons, and these nucleons are present in the nucleus. They are present in the nucleus of atom. This we already know. Fine. So here, based on this electrons, protons, neutrons, the atoms have some important properties, like we can take, again you take, based on these electrons, protons and neutrons, atoms have important properties. So atoms have properties like, they have properties like, we can take, let us understand the properties of atom in terms of symbol Z. This is A and this is N. So here Z stands for atomic number of atom or element. A stands for atomic mass, and N stands for, that is, number of neutrons. So here, what is the relationship between Z, A and N? But before going to the relationship, let us try to define the atomic number and mass number of the atom of an element. So if you go for atomic number, that is first one, atomic number of an atom of an element or atom of an element, it's designated by the symbol Z, and atomic number of an element is always equal to the number of protons present in nucleus of atom. Number of protons present in nucleus of atom is simply called as atomic number. Next is, what we have to understand here is, suppose take some examples. You take sodium. Na is sodium. Sodium has atomic number 11. If it is having atomic number 11, that means this sodium is having 11 protons. if it has 11 protons, we should also understand that it contains 11 electrons. Remember always, so we can generalize one important point here for the atomic number. We can say that for all neutral elements, for all neutral atom of elements, number of electrons is equal to number of protons. So once again, the atomic number of an element, its symbol is designated by Z. The atomic number meaning is the number of protons present in the nucleus of an atom is nothing but atomic number. If you take sodium, for example, if you take sodium as an element, atom of an element, atomic number is 11, so it contains 11 protons and also 11 electrons. So thereby we can generalize saying that for all neutral atoms of an element, the number of electrons is equal to number of protons. So you can take as many number of examples. Suppose if you are taking that is nitrogen, if you take nitrogen, its atomic numbers, N is nitrogen, its atomic number is 7. If its atomic number is 7, that means it contains 7 protons. And also it contains 7 electrons. You take any neutral element, it is the same case. You take fluorine, for example, fluorine symbol is F, its atomic number is 9. If its atomic number is 9, Z is atomic number, so it contains 9 protons. And it contains 9 electrons, so on and so forth. So all these points comes in terms of the atomic number. So the next part of the discussion here is arrangement of electrons in atom. So here, when we go to the arrangement of electrons in atom, usually if you take an atom, it has a positively charged nucleus and it has shells 1, 2, 3 and 4. So what we do here is we designate these shells as, either we can designate it as K, L, M, N, or we can designate them as numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. So the maximum number of electrons to be accommodated in each energy level or each orbit of a given atom, we can use the formula 2n square, where n represents 2n square, where here n represents the energy level of an atom, or simply orbit of an atom. Suppose if I am substituting, that is, if I am substituting, that is 2n square, if you take, if I am taking the n value as 1, which is the value of the energy level, here actually the n represents the principal quantum number. Principal quantum number is the quantum number of an atom, which is the property of an atom, which decides the position of the electron in a given energy level, main energy level. N actually signifies the position of the electron in the energy level of an orbit. So if you take this n value is nothing but the energy level value of a given atom of an element. If it is n is equal to 1, then you apply the formula 2n square. If it is 2n square, then you can take 2 into 1 square, which is equal to 2. 2 means 2 electron. That means first orbit, first energy level, either it is 1 or k, it can accommodate only 2 electrons. Go for second case, if it is n is equal to 2, then apply the formula 2n square. If you are applying the 2n square, 2 into 2 square, which is equal to, that is 8 electrons. That means second shell can accommodate only 8 electrons. Likewise, you can go for the third shell, n is equal to 3, which is equal to 2 into 2n square, which is equal to 2 into 3 square, which is equal to 18 electrons. So third shell can accommodate 18 electrons and the fourth shell can accommodate 32 electrons. So that means this contribution of the electrons into the various energy levels or various orbits is always fixed. First orbit can, under any circumstances, the first orbit can accommodate a maximum electrons to be filled. For the first orbit is only 2 electrons. Second orbit can accommodate only 8 electrons. third orbit can accommodate only 18 electrons and the fourth orbit can accommodate 32 electrons. So what is happening here is, that is because the topic says that arrangement of electrons in atom. So here suppose if I am going to take orbital concept method, that is box method or orbital concept method, if you take according to the orbital concept method, that is orbital concept. Using the orbital concept, we have, when you go for an orbital, when you are going for an orbital, we have four types of orbitals: one s orbital, one p orbital, one d orbital, and one f orbital. F orbital. So here what is happening is, based on this s orbital is spherical in shape. S orbital is spherical, p orbital is dumbbell, d orbital is double dumbbell, and f orbital is complex double dumbbell. So therefore what is happening here is, like if you take, and each orbital, when you say orbital, orbits are made up of, I'll put it like this: orbits, energy levels, you go for energy levels are made up of orbits are in turn made up of orbitals. Energy levels are made up of orbits are made up of orbitals, and orbitals are in turn made up of s orbitals, p orbitals, d orbitals, and f orbitals. So therefore capacity that is electron capacity, electron accommodation of each orbital, if you take s can accommodate only 2 electrons, p can accommodate 6 electrons, d can accommodate 10 electrons, and f can accommodate only 14 electrons. So s, you have to read it as s2 but not s square. Always read it, understand as s2, p6, d10, and f14, but don't read it as s square, p to the power of 6 or d to the power of 10 and f to the power of 14. Reading in that sense is wrong, because for our convenience we are just reading it as s2 means, if you are reading it as s2 means s orbital can accommodate 2 electrons. If you are reading it as p6 means the p orbital can accommodate, p sublevel or p orbital can accommodate 6 electrons, d sublevel or d orbitals can accommodate 10 electrons, and f sublevel or f orbitals can accommodate 14 electrons. Maximum of 14 electrons can be accommodated by the f orbital, and d orbitals can accommodate 10 and p6s2. So based on this, here we can go for the distribution of electrons into various atoms. If you take some specific elements and if you try to apply all these concepts whatever we have done so far, take some specific elements, and in that elements, based on the atomic number and based on the number of electrons, we can easily understand how the electrons are being distributed into the various orbits or energy levels based on the type of orbitals. So before going to the orbitals, first let us blindly try to fill the electrons into various orbitals, into various orbits based on the number of electrons present in it. So here concisely let me put it in this way: electron distribution into orbits, electron distribution into orbits and its electronic configuration. And its electronic configuration. So when you go for, actually what do you mean by electron distribution? Electron distribution is simply, that is accommodation of electrons into orbits obeying the rule of 2n square. is the electron distribution. What is electronic configuration? If you go for electronic configuration, distribution of electrons into orbitals of various energy levels in the increasing order of their energy, increasing order of their energy. Okay, fine. So let us not go deeper into this statement, because only for a convenience I have added I am giving you two different statements for electronic distribution and electronic configuration. I am trying to give you two different dimensions of statements here, just for the convenience, just for learning the higher level of writing the electronic configuration. But as of now, these two statements, if you take one or two elements and if you start distributing the electrons into various orbits, you will come to know exactly what is happening. So for example, if I am taking directly, I am going to put a question like this: distribute total electrons of element whose atomic number is 15 and 19 respectively. Is the question which is given to you. Then how will you answer this question? So that means one element atomic number is 15 and the other element atomic number is 19. So if you are taking an element, let the element be M, Now because its atomic number is 15, if the atomic number is 15, M is the atomic number 15, so the atomic mass must be 31. So therefore this element M, now it is going to become phosphorus 1531. So from this, what information you are gathering? That means the atomic number of phosphorus is 15, then the atomic mass of phosphorus is 31, and the number of neutrons in phosphorus is 16. Atomic number is 15, mass number is 31, number of neutrons are 16. Okay, fine. Then now because the phosphorus is in the neutral state, so the number of protons present in the phosphorus must be equal to number of electrons. That means here we can add one statement: number of protons is equal to number of electrons present in the phosphorus atom. So now take the nucleus of the phosphorus atom. The first orbit is nucleus first orbit. According to the normal standard format, if you are going to the standard format of distributing electrons into various energy levels, first orbit is always 2 electrons, second orbit 8 electrons, third orbit 18 electrons, and fourth orbit is 32 electrons. Right now, because the phosphorus contains 15 electrons, because if the atomic number is 15, number of protons are 15. If number of protons are 15, then the number of electrons are also 15. So therefore, in the first shell, let us take 2 electrons. That means out of 15 electrons, we have filled only 2 electrons. Then the second orbit, if that is the case, go for the second orbit. Second orbit can accommodate a maximum of 8 electrons. That means so far out of 15 electrons, we have filled up only 10 electrons. 2 plus 8, 10 electrons are there. Now remaining 5 electrons will go to the third orbit. The actual capacity of the third orbit is 18 electrons, but right now we are compensating only with 5 electrons, because if you fill another 5 electrons, now if you count all the electrons, 2 plus, so therefore here I can just count it like this: 2 plus 8 electrons plus 5 electrons, total 15 electrons. That means what information you are able to gather. That means here the electron distribution for phosphorus 15 atomic number 31, mass number for the phosphorus atom as an element. It contains a nucleus. First orbit is 2 electrons, second orbit is 8 electrons, and third orbit is 5 electrons. So if you are adding all the electrons, you are getting 15 electrons. That means here these 5 electrons which are filled in the last orbit, these are called valency electrons. These are called valence electrons, and these 2 and 8 we call them as core electrons. 2 and 8 we can call them as core electrons. So we have two different types of electrons available for a given element, atom of an element, that is core electrons present in the inner shells. Core electrons are always present in the inner shells, and valence electrons are present in the outermost orbit. That's why the electrons are called valency electrons. So that means from this we are able to understand that the total number of electrons present in the given element, it can be distributed into two formats. The inner core, the inner shells have core electrons, and the outermost shell is having valence electrons. And valence electrons of any atom of an element always decides its properties. Its properties, particularly in terms of properties with respect to chemical properties. With respect to chemical properties. So the next topic is electronic configuration. Electronic configuration of first 20 elements. Electronic configuration of first 20 elements. So because we are saying that first 20 elements are there, then what I am going to do is I am going to take element, symbol, and I am going to take electronic configuration, that is electron distribution. Electron distribution. So first one is hydrogen. First element is hydrogen. Symbol is H. Electronic configuration. Take the nucleus. First orbit, 1 electron. This is first element. Go for the second. Helium. Symbol is element. This is symbol. Electronic configuration, electron distribution. Helium, symbol is He. Take the nucleus. First shell, it contains 2 electrons. Over. Go for the lithium. The symbol is Li. So you take the nucleus, first shell 2 electrons, next shell 1 electron. Go for beryllium. Beryllium, symbol is Be. Nucleus, first shell 2 electrons, second shell again 2 electrons. Go for boron. Symbol is B. Nucleus, this is nucleus, first shell 2 electrons, next shell 3 electrons. That means what we are noticing here is because hydrogen and helium they have only 1 or 2 electrons, up to 2 electrons, up to 12, maximum of first orbit can accommodate a maximum of 2 electrons. For any element, if the number of electrons are greater than 2 electrons, then the second shell is being introduced. Thus, when the second shell is being introduced, the second shell can accommodate, it can be housed with maximum number of electrons up to 8 in the second shell. The first shell can be accommodated with maximum of 2 electrons. That means by the time you fill all the electrons which have its maximum capacity of 2 electrons and 8 electrons in the first and second shell, that comes to almost 10 electrons. So that means here you are able to find that, for example, if you take boron has total 5 electrons. If you take, I am just putting over here only 1 electron, here 2 electrons, here lithium 3 electrons, beryllium 4 electrons, boron 5 electrons. So based on that we are trying to fill the electrons into various orbits. Again go for carbon. If you are taking carbon, again take carbon, symbol is C. Total number of electrons are 6. So electron distribution, nucleus, first shell 2 electrons, next shell 4 electrons. Carbon is over. Go for nitrogen. Nitrogen, if you take, symbol is N, total 7 electrons, nucleus, first shell 2 electrons, second shell 5 electrons. Go for oxygen. Symbol is O, it contains 8 electrons, nucleus 2 electrons and 6 electrons. Go for fluorine. Symbol is F, it contains 9 electrons. So fluorine contains 9 electrons, so nucleus, first shell 2 electrons, second shell 7 electrons. Go for, that is neon. If you are going for neon, symbol is Ne, and it contains 10 electrons, and it has positively charged nucleus. This is 2 electrons and this is 8 electrons. Go for sodium. Symbol is Na, it has a Latin name, so it has 11 electrons. It has nucleus, first orbit 2 electrons, second orbit 8 electrons and third orbit 1 electron. You can see that from sodium the number of shells have become 3. Why the number of shells have become 3 in the case of sodium? Because the second orbit, the second shell can accommodate a maximum of 8 electrons only. That means total 10 electrons of the capacity with respect to the first orbit and second orbit have been completed. So the next electron, that is the differentiating electron, that is the last electron of sodium, the differentiating electron, the last electron of sodium has to forcibly enter into the next part of the shell. The actual capacity of the third orbit is 18 electrons, but out of 18 now it has utilized only 1 electron, so still 17 electrons can be filled up in the third shell. But as of now, because sodium is having only 11 electrons, so only 1 electron you can fill in the third orbit, because already that is going to become the 11th electron. So the 11th electron is accommodated in the third orbit of the sodium. And don't forget that unlike neon, sodium has 3 shells, whereas neon is having only 2 shells. So go for the next element, that is magnesium. The symbol is Mg and the number of electrons distributed. So nucleus, first orbit 2 electrons, second orbit 8 electrons, third orbit again 2 electrons. This is for magnesium. Go for aluminium. After magnesium it is aluminium. Of course magnesium has 12 electrons, aluminium has 13 electrons. So nucleus, first shell 2 electrons, second shell 8 electrons and third shell 3 electrons. Then go for silicon. If you are going for silicon, symbol is Si. Of course it contains 14 electrons. So nucleus, first shell 2 electrons, 8 electrons in the second shell and 4 electrons in the valency shell. Go for phosphorus. If you take phosphorus, symbol is P, 15 electrons, nucleus, first shell 2 electrons, second shell 8 electrons and 5 electrons. Sulfur, symbol is S, 16 electrons, nucleus, first orbit 2 electrons, second orbit 8 electrons and third orbit is 6 electrons. And last one, that is chlorine. If you take, symbol is Cl. Cl is the symbol, 17 electrons. So nucleus, first orbit 2 electrons, second orbit 8 electrons and this is 7 electrons. Last but not the least, of course potassium and calcium both are available for us. So we'll go for the next part here. So go for the next element, that is chlorine is over. So go for argon. Symbol is Ar. it contains 18 electrons. So nucleus 2 electrons, 8 electrons, and again 8 electrons. This is for argon. 17, 18, 19 potassium, POTSS, IUM, potassium K, it contains 19 electrons. So here nucleus, first orbit 2 electrons, second orbit 8 electrons, again third orbit 8 electrons, and we have fourth orbit. Here it's an exception actually. Potassium actually goes with fourth orbit, not with the third orbit. It's an exception. And go for, that is calcium, also same thing. If you go for calcium, symbol is Ca, 20 electrons, first orbit 2 electrons, second orbit 8 electrons, again 8 electrons, in the last orbit it is 2 electrons. So this is how the electron distribution takes place for the 20 elements based on their number of electrons available in each of the cases. Go for the next part of the discussion here, that is inertness of noble gases. Inertness of noble gases. First of all, if you take noble gases are also called inert gases. Inert gases, they are also called zero group elements. Sometimes they are also called aerogens. So for example, these noble gases, they are inert gases because they are chemically unreactive, and they are stable. They are always stable. It is not easy for us to make the noble gas elements to participate in the chemical reaction because they have stable electronic configuration, and that's the reason we say they are chemically unreactive and they are stable. Inert gases. Next, zero group. If you go for zero group, all these elements, they have their valency, they are called zero group because their valency is equal to 0. Their valency is 0. Their valency is 0 because neither they lose the electron nor they gain electrons. That's why their valency is 0. Then we are calling them as aerogens. You call them as aerogens because of their availability in atmospheric. Their availability in atmospheric air. You know that air is a mixture, and air as a mixture contains, when I say air here, air is a mixture, so it contains oxygen, nitrogen, then carbon dioxide, then hydrocarbons, methane, and mixture of noble gases. So this is the composition of the air. So we have to isolate all the gases which are present in the mixture. This is the composition. This is the composition of air. So what are the elements present in the noble gases? For example, if you take the elements of all the noble gases, if you take these elements, that is helium, neon, argon, krypton, xenon, and of course radon. One more element is there, that is radon. So He is for helium, neon, any neon, then argon, krypton, xenon, and of course that is xenon, and last one is that is radon. So if you go for helium in particular, if you are going for helium, writing the electronic configuration, in helium the electron distribution is, suppose if you are taking, I am just going to mark it like this, that is K, L, M, N, something like this. If I am going to mark, then we will see what will happen here. Electron distribution. So marking, helium will have, this is something like electron distribution, K, L, M and N. Configuration. For helium, if you are taking for helium, what you are noticing here is, for helium only 2 electrons are filled up in the K shell. Neon, 2 electrons in K shell and 8 electrons in the L shell. Argon, 2 electrons in K shell, 8 electrons in the L shell and again 8 electrons in the M shell. If you go for krypton, and one more thing, the atomic number of helium is 2. If you go for atomic number, helium is 2. Atomic number of neon is 10. Atomic number of argon is 18. Atomic number of krypton, that is 36. Atomic number of xenon, it is 54, and the atomic number of radon is 86, is radon. So what you are noticing here is 18 means atomic number 18 means neutral, means 18 electrons must be there. Krypton, 2 electrons, 8 electrons, again 8 electrons, and you find that 18 of 18, 8 plus 8, 16 plus 2, 18, and I think another 18 electrons we can fill up in the valency shell. So 18 plus 18, 36, it is quite adjustable. Then if you go for xenon, this is 2 electrons, again here 8 electrons, then 18, and I think we have to go for one more shell. We need to go for one more shell, that is MnO, going for one more shell, particularly in the case of xenon and radon, particularly if you take xenon and radon. So I think if I am taking here 18, so almost 18 plus 18, 36, so 36 means 54 minus 36 is 2, still we have to fill up 22 electrons. You need to fill 22 electrons, we have to fill up. So 22 electrons will go to, that is, will go to the O shell. Then likewise you can go for radon, this is 2 electrons, 8 electrons, then this is again 8 electrons, 18. Atomic number of radon is 86, so 86 means already we have filled up 18, and I think this is 32. 18 means already 36 are there. 36 if you take, 36 if you are going to take, maybe almost 50 electrons are coming here to actually the normal filling, normal distribution for radon. Separately I am going to explain. Radon is 86, so I will just take it like this: 2 electrons, 8 electrons, 8 electrons, 18 electrons and 32 electrons. So 32 means if you add all this, 2 electrons plus 8 electrons plus 8 electrons plus 18 electrons plus 32 electrons, if you add, total we are going to get 32 plus 32, 64 you are getting. 64 means I think you have to subtract 64 here. So 64 if you are going to subtract, then you are going to get 2 here, and this is 22. So might be we have to take 32 electrons, 5, and one more shell is there, 1 2 3 4 5, one more shell MnOp also will be introduced. Only for radon the p orbital shell, also p orbital is going to be introduced, and that is going to become 22 electrons. So total, that is, so what you are noticing here is, particularly if you are taking helium, it is having 2 electrons in the outermost orbit, neon has 8 electrons, argon has 8 electrons, and even krypton also will have 18 electrons in the outermost orbit. So you are noticing that first 3 elements if you take, that means if 2 electrons are there, it is called duplet stability. If 8 electrons are there, it is octet stability. And again, one more 8 electrons are there, again it is octet stability. So in a nutshell, what we have to understand is, all the noble gas elements, either they acquire the duplet stability or they are going to acquire octet stability, because almost all the noble gas elements in the valency shell, either they should have 8 electrons in the outermost orbit or they should have 2 electrons in the outermost orbit. Only helium is the only element in the noble gas where it can have only 2 electrons in the outermost orbit. So the valence electrons are 2 in the case of helium, so it is acquiring duplet stability. If you go for helium and argon in particular, they have 8 electrons in the outermost shell, so the valence electrons are 8. 8 means they definitely acquire the octet stability. So rest of the elements also, I suppose according to our convenience, we can understand that remaining all elements except helium, all of them, they are going to acquire octet stability, because they usually have 8 electrons in the valency shell. So the next part of the discussion here is, that is valency concept. When you say valency, what do you mean by valency? I'll simply say valency is nothing but combining capacity of element. Bluntly, we can use only one single meaning for valency, that is the combining capacity of an element is simply called as valency. Then what do you mean by valency electrons? If you go for valence electrons, number of electrons present in outermost shell or orbit of atom are called valence electrons. Now go for types of valencies. If you go for valency types, if you take, it is of two types. One is electrovalency, and the one is covalency. Electrovalency and covalency. If you go for electrovalency is obtained, it can be obtained in two methods. Electrovalency can be obtained by loss of electron of atom. Electrovalency can be obtained, and also sometimes gain of electron of atom, it can be acquired. So whatever may be the case, the electrovalency is of both the types. It can, the valency which is obtained by a species either because of the loss of electron of an atom, or sometimes it is gain of electron of an atom. If you go for covalency, is nothing but number of bond pair electrons shared by an atom in a molecule. Number of bond pair electrons shared by an atom in a molecule is simply nothing but covalency. So one more shortcut, if you want to calculate the valency, go for valency calculation of, if you are going for the calculation of valency, we can use two formulas. We can use, one is elements from 1a to up to 1a up to, that is 4a. 4a means 14th group. 1a means it is alkali metals. 1a means it is alkali metals. So from alkali metals to 14th group, that is carbon family, we can directly use the formula valency is equal to valency V is equal to its group number. Valency is equal to group number. For example, for 1a group, you take sodium, potassium and rubidium. What is its valency means? I can simply say 1. Why it is 1? Because these are all metals. So they lose electrons. They can lose only 1 electrons. When they are going to lose 1 electron, its valency is 1. Go for example, if you are going for 14th group, what is the valency of, this is example 1. Example 2, what is the valency of 4th A group? 4th A group, that is carbon family. So again valency is equal to, valency of carbon family is equal to 4. That is because if you take carbon, silicon, germanium, tin and lead, these are all the elements which are belonging to the carbon family, 14th group. So in all these elements you find that the number of valence electrons are 4. So its valency is equal to 4. Similarly, if you go to the valency, that is, if you are going to the valency, that is valency of elements from 3rd A, that is 13th group, 3rd A, 13th group to, that is 13th group to 8th A group, 8th A, that is 18th group. 18th group, we can use the formula, that is valency V is equal to 8 minus the group number. So take the 15th group. 15th group is 5A. 5A is nitrogen family. So here you can take elements nitrogen, phosphorus, arsenic, antimony and bismuth. Go for 16th group. 6th A group, oxygen family, oxygen, sulfur, selenium, tellurium, polonium. Similarly, go for 17th group. 7th A, that is halogens. Can take fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine and astatine. Go for 18th group. 8th A group, noble gases. So helium, neon, argon, krypton, xenon and radon. Bismuth, Vi bismuth, PO polonium, At astatine, Rn radon. All these are radioactive elements. So they need not be under our discussion. So let us ignore all the radioactive elements. But suppose if I am underlining phosphorus, I am underlining sulfur, I am underlining chlorine, and I am underlining neon. Calculate the valency. The question goes like this. Calculate the valency. Question. Calculate the valency of underlined elements. Calculate the valency of underlined elements. So first one is phosphorus. So you know that phosphorus belongs to 50th group. So valency, I'll put it like this, V of P means valency of phosphorus is equal to 8 minus phosphorus group number is 5. So therefore 8 minus 5 is equal to 3. So therefore valency of phosphorus is 3. Valency of sulfur, S is equal to 8 minus 6, which is equal to 2. So therefore valency of sulfur is 2. Similarly, valency of chlorine, if you take Cl, which is equal to 8 minus the group number of chlorine is 7 halogens, which is equal to 1. So valency of neon, if you take 8 minus the group number 8, which is equal to 0. So therefore the valency of phosphorus is 3, valency of sulfur is 2, valency of chlorine is 1, and valency of neon is 0 respectively. So the next part of the discussion here is, that is, you go to the valency. If you go to electrovalency, it is nothing but the charge acquired. The charge acquired by a species. The charge acquired by a species either due to loss or gain of electrons, of valency electrons, gain of valency electrons. So for example, what is happening, you know that metals always they are electropositive, and they lose electrons. Metals are electropositive, they lose electrons. So charge acquired by a species either due to loss or gain of valence electrons is nothing but electrovalency. And if you go for metals are electropositive, so they always lose the electrons. You take sodium, is a metal. Sodium is a metal, it contains 2, 8, 1. So 1 is the valence electron distribution, electronic configuration of sodium in the form of electron distribution, 2 electrons, 8 electrons, 1 electron. So this sodium, it will lose 1 electron and it will acquire 1 unit of positive charge, 2, 8. Right now it contains only 10 electrons, and here it contains 11 electrons. So that means what you are able to notice is it has lost 1 electron to acquire 1 unit of positive charge. So what is the valency of the Na plus ion means, it is what is electrovalency of Na plus ion means, it is plus 1. Actually the electrovalency is equal to, that is, because we are saying valency, it is 1, we need to take only the magnitude of the charge, not the sign convention. So you take magnesium, likewise you take magnesium, magnesium also, it contains 2, 8, 2, total 12 electrons are there. So this magnesium, it is going to lose 2 electrons, and right now it has only 10 electrons, so it has 10 electrons, and now it has acquired 2 units of positive charge. So what is the electrovalency? Of magnesium means it is 2. So likewise you can take for aluminium the electrovalency, EV means electrovalency is plus 3. For silicon, electrovalency is plus 4, and so on. Likewise, you have non-metals. If you go for non-metals, for example, that is all non-metals. If you take, that is, non-metals are electronegative. They are electronegative. Non-metals are electronegative in nature, so they gain electrons. If they gain electrons, then their electrovalency is negative. That means, for example, you take some examples here. Take, for example, you take chlorine. Chlorine is a non-metal. It has 2, 8, 7. It has 7 valence electrons, so it gains 1 electron and it forms Cl minus. So what is electrovalency of chlorine means? Electrovalency of chlorine is 1. Of course, it carries negative charge, but it is 1. So likewise, if you want the electrovalency, you go for oxygen. That is, oxygen, if you take O is oxygen, 2, 6 electrons are there, so it gains 2 electrons and it forms O2 minus. O2 minus means now it has 8 electrons, so total 10 electrons, here only 8 electrons. So that means here what is electrovalency means it is 2 for oxygen. So likewise, you can calculate the electrovalency based on the number of electrons lost by the metals and number of electrons gained by the non-metals. For non-metals, the electrovalency is always negative. For metals, the electrovalency is always positive. And whether it is electrovalency is a positive electrovalency or negative electrovalency, because the concept of valency only takes the numbers, numerical part, ignoring the sign convention. So the valency can be read as simply 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that, depending upon the loss of electrons or gain of